Welcome to Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. This is going to be a complete change of course, but hell, why not? Talk about something entirely different. I figured that since I just went back into doing this podcasting, I would discuss a bit of my broadcasting background. For any of you who are thinking about getting into broadcasting, or for that matter, podcasting, you might find this to be helpful, maybe not, but I'll go ahead and share it anyway, and hopefully some people will find it helpful. I started out wanting to be an actor, and I went to acting school for a long time, mostly in my teens. And the last acting school I attended was called the Theater Academy. It was in New York City. It was a splinter from Strasberg's Little Theater. Most people in the business know who Lee Strasberg was. It was run by the late Hal and Ruth Persons. So it was Hal and Ruth Persons' Theater Academy in New York City. And I would go there every week, and we would meet in their basement, the basement of their home, and they would train us. For some reason, the aspect of the acting training that I was most interested in was voice. I loved the voice training. When I went into it, I had a really strong New York City accent. Well, any New York City accent to me is strong. Maybe it wasn't that strong, but it was a New York City accent. I mean, I was born in Manhattan, grew up in the Bronx and Queens, so I didn't talk quite like Bernie Sanders, maybe somewhere between Bernie Sanders and the unmentionable one, Donald Trump, somewhere along that line. Bernie Sanders, of course, is from Brooklyn. Donald Trump is from Queens. What a lot of people don't realize is that there is no such thing as a New York City accent per se. There are many different New York City accents, just like in London. You have the King's or Queen's English accent, you have the Cockney accent, and many others as well. Just in London. Same thing is true in New York City. If you're from New York City, you can tell where somebody is from with a pretty good accuracy just by listening to them talk for a few moments. And when anybody would listen to me talk, they would immediately know that I was from the Bronx, because I did have a Bronx accent. I was raised in the Pelham Parkway section, if any of you know where that is, on Wallace Avenue. Then we moved to Bayside, Queens, which was also a nice place to live. Both of them were Jewish neighborhoods. I was raised a non-practicing Jew, with an emphasis on non-practicing. A lot of people think that, well, even non-practicing Jews at least celebrate the high holy days. Not us. And not many people I know who are non-practicing Jews celebrate the high holy days, and we certainly did not. There was no talk of Judaism in my family. My mother was a staunch atheist. My sister didn't know what she believed in. My father said he believed in God, but I'm not really sure if he did. I did believe in God, but in a rather strange kind of New Agey version of God at the time. So it was a kind of a mix of all sorts of different sorts of things that dominated our family. Anyway, getting back to what I was talking about. I really caught on to this thing about speaking in what was then called General American Standard English, which is basically the accent that is spoken in northern Wisconsin, for the most part, with some modifications. It's a Midwestern accent. In fact, where I live here now, in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, which is not Texas. It is Texas, but it's not Texas. People here who are not Mexican American speak with a Midwestern accent. not with a Texas accent. This area is so cut off from the rest of the state that people here, I haven't met a single person from the Rio Grande Valley who speaks with a Texas accent. I met one person who speaks with one, but he's not from here. He's a transplant from Dallas. So this is a rather strange area. So I realized that what I liked most about acting school, aside from improvisational theater, which I still love, was the voice. And I was captivated by that. Learning how to speak properly, getting rid of my Bronx accent. And I worked on it really hard. And it took me a few months, I guess, to get rid of it. And then I just got better and better, fortunately, after that. I decided that I probably should end up working in broadcasting. So I ended up majoring in journalism, getting an ABJ, Bachelor of Arts in Journalism degree from the University of Georgia. The only industry I worked in journalism was broadcast journalism, radio. I never worked in TV journalism. Back then I really didn't have, I would say, the right face for TV. I think I probably would more now, but I looked kind of awkward and skinny, and my face really didn't, I was not very photogenic back then. I think I'm somehow I've gotten more photogenic over the years. But back then wouldn't work. So I worked in radio, which was fine with me. My first job that I got, where I made very little money, by very little I mean very little. I mean $5 an hour. That was it. And that was back in 1974 to 1976. But still, even then, that was not very much. That was not very much. I believe it was minimum wage, but just barely back at that time, maybe. And we all got the same amounts of money. Didn't matter whether you were a jock, a DJ, we say jocks, newscasters, didn't matter. We all got the same amounts of money. We all got $5 an hour. Not a lot of money. But at least I had some training. I had some background working in journalism. And when I got there, the most popular jock at the station heard me give my first newscast, and he immediately gave me the nickname of The Voice. And that stuck for as long as I was at that station. People would say as I walked into the studio, "The Voice is here." And I took that as a compliment, and I still do take it as a compliment. He meant it that way, and I take it that way. Because I worked really hard on my voice, and that the fact that he appreciated it, how good. It was nice that he appreciated it. The person that I must say in broadcasting that I have admired the most is a somewhat controversial figure in recent years, and I wish he weren't. It's Brian Williams. Brian Williams is a brilliant journalist, and he is literally an autodidact. He has no training in journalism. He never even graduated from college. He went to college but never graduated. Somehow, he managed to teach himself how to be a marvelous interviewer, had a great voice, had a great style of presentation, very good sense of humor. But it was that sense of humor which got him into trouble. Because one time when he was on a show, and I forget which show it was, he was telling a story about his experience in war, and he elaborated too much. He exaggerated and made it seem like he was in much greater jeopardy of death than he really was. Now, he was just trying to tell a joke. That's the way Brian was. In real life, Brian was a storyteller. But Brian learned the hard way that if you are a top anchor, or even any anchor, even a local anchor, you can't do that. Because people are going to take what you say seriously, even if you mean it as a joke. So if you're telling a joke, it needs to be clear that it is a joke. Brian was not that cautious, so he paid for it. He was, at that time, the anchor of the NBC Nightly News. He lost that gig. For about a year, he was on leave. He was very apologetic. He never blamed anyone for it. So he handled the thing like a real professional should. Then eventually, NBC brought him back. Well, they brought him back to MSNBC. They gave him a show which was originally intended to be temporary, leading up to the election which resulted in Donald Trump becoming president. It was called The 11th Hour. Really good show. Brian's talents really shined. He was able to do much better, I thought, on that show than he was on the NBC Nightly News. Those nightly news shows, or CBS Evening News, or ABC, whatever, they're like 20 minutes, 21 minutes with commercials. You don't really have that much time. And you really have no opportunity to let your own personality shine. You are pretty much limited by the script. Now, any good anchor will write her or his own script, maybe with the assistance of others, but the supervision is done by the anchor. The anchor writes the script. So what you would hear from Brian Williams each night was generally written by Brian Williams, but he couldn't improvise. When he would ask a guest a question, he could not ask a follow-up unless it was prepared already. Why? Because there wasn't enough time. You're literally down to the clock, to the minute, and you have to finish at the precise time, or else literally the system will cut you off. That's how it works in TV, and how it works in much of radio as well. Now, Brian got tired of working for the 11th Hour at some point over a year ago, and he announced his resignation. Well, NBC was not happy that Brian Williams was going. He was one of their biggest paychecks. He made them a lot of money on MSNBC. So they offered him more money. They tried to get him to stay, but Brian Williams politely said no, he wanted to leave. Now, people always assumed that Brian Williams was looking for something like the NBC Nightly News again. So what happened? Well, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, CBS offered him the CBS Evening News, that same show that was at one time, when I was a little kid, hosted by Walter Cronkite. I once met Walter Cronkite back when I was in journalism school at the University of Georgia. We give out the Peabody Awards, and we were giving a special Peabody Award, a Lifetime Achievement Award, to Walter Cronkite, and so I actually got to shake hands with him, which was a great pleasure for me, because he was somebody that I had always admired, not only because of his talent as a broadcaster, but also for his voice, which is I've always loved the voice. Whether Walter Cronkite or Brian Williams, I think they were both tremendous talents, and Brian Williams, I hope, eventually goes back. But the problem is, nobody knows what Brian Williams wants. They all thought he wanted something like the CBS Evening News. When he turned it down, everyone was shocked. So no one knows what he wants. Does Brian need to work for the rest of his life? No. He has enough money to last him for the rest of his life. But most people in that business don't simply drop away. They keep on going for as long as they can. In some cases, and I won't mention any names, in some cases, too long. But Brian Williams at least turned down that one thing. Maybe he is looking for something better. Maybe he wants more time with his family. Who knows? If you want to get into radio journalism, or for that matter, any kind of radio broadcasting, my suggestion is that you go to a really, really good voice coaching school. That way you will stand out from all the rest, because most people who go into radio broadcasting go there without much voice training. That is not what journalism schools specialize in. I received absolutely no voice training at the Grady School of Journalism at the University of Georgia. Literally none. Fortunately, I already had the voice training from having attended the Theater Academy in New York City. But I didn't get anything like that when I was at University of Georgia. So if you want to get that kind of training, if you want to develop a really good quality of voice, you need to seek out that training on your own. That way, again, you will be someone who people will take a second look at, because most people won't sound like you sound. And that is what benefited me. Now, in the end, I decided that although I loved broadcast journalism, I loved radio journalism, what I hated was the fact that I was being paid so little. A lot of people think that people who work in local markets, in radio journalism or television journalism, make a lot of money. Well, unless you're in a major market, place like New York or Atlanta or San Francisco or Kansas City or Los Angeles, you're not going to make a lot of money. Maybe you'll make $30,000 a year or $40,000 a year. I mean, that's not much today. I don't know how people can even live on that amount of money today, considering the cost of living in a lot of major markets. And if you're living in a place that is not a major market, you're going to make even less than that. So going into that business, although it was really appealing to me, I realized that in order for me to be successful, meaning to have enough money to get by and to pay back all of my many student loans, I would have to get into a major market. And you can't just snap your fingers and get into one. It takes a long time, a lot of effort. You have to know the right people, and I didn't know anybody. So I would have to literally be noticed by somebody in a local market. And all during that time, I would have to be living on a very minimal salary. So that's what put me out of it. And I've always felt bad about that, because I love broadcasting. And that's why I do this podcast, although it's been a few years. I took a few year vacation from it, but I'm back at it again, at least for a little while. I'm not sure how long I'll keep on doing it. And it's something that I really love. And so doing the podcast for me is a way of returning back to my first love of broadcasting, of using my voice, which is a very pleasurable thing for me. Some people could care less about that. But believe me, even if you don't care about it, even if you think, I don't care about how my voice sounds, the person who is hiring you is going to care. And so it's always a good idea to keep in mind that you need to get whatever accent you have. It doesn't matter. Even if you're from the Midwest, you have some accent. Maybe your voice is too nasal. A lot of people have problems with nasal voices. You need to get rid of that nasal voice. It sounds really, really bad over the radio or TV, much worse than it sounds in normal conversation. That's something you can only do if you have a really good voice coach, which I fortunately did, mostly with Hal Persons. His wife did not really do that aspect of it. She focused more on the improvisational theater, which Hal did too, but that was mostly Ruth's job. So again, that's my suggestion to you. I would certainly encourage people to consider going into broadcast journalism. It is very pleasurable, especially if you like losing. there's a slip of the tongue. You do occasionally lose your voice when you're broadcasting. That does happen, unfortunately, once in a while. Using your voice, then that is something that you might want to think of going into. Investigate it. You may decide it's not for you. Try it out. A lot of areas have volunteer stations, like for example, a branch of National Public Radio may offer a slot for somebody to do local reporting where they don't pay you. Try it out. Do something like that. Who cares if they pay you? Well, as long as you have some other source of income, and then see if you like it. If you like it, then you can pursue it further. Another possibility is finding a radio station for the blind and print handicapped. I did that myself as volunteer work. Now, you can't get that broadcast with a regular radio. You have to get a special radio which is provided for you by the state that you're living in. And then you can actually get that broadcast. It includes newscasts. Sometimes I would be asked to read an entire page of a newspaper, which honestly I did not enjoy so much, because when you're doing broadcast journalism, you're speaking conversationally. Newspapers are not written conversationally. They're written in an entirely different style, so it doesn't really mesh reading a newspaper article over the radio. But that's what I would sometimes do, and I still liked it because I liked talking. I could talk your ear off for hours and hours. Anyway, that's it for now. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., wishing you a pleasant day or a pleasant evening.